What would you do if the man you betrayed showed up with legal papers instead of shouting? I thought I was in control when I used his credit card behind his back, but the day he posted the bill online and froze my accounts, everything shifted. Now I'm the one exposed, and he's the one holding all the cards. My name is Aurelia Venn. I am 34 years old. I manage a busy retail store, and I like to think of myself as someone who deserved more excitement than my steady accountant husband could ever possibly provide. We lived in a pleasant 3-bedroom house in the suburbs, with our children Ella and Noah running around, like proof that everything looked normal from the outside, and I leaned into that perfect image whenever anyone asked about us. Leo was dependable in that boring way that people respect, always budgeting carefully and saving money, never complaining about the endless hours I spent on myself or with my sister or mother. But his patience began to irritate me more than reassure me. I started looking elsewhere for validation, and that is when Damien appeared in my life at the gym. Younger, funnier, a man who complimented me on details Leo never noticed anymore. And I let myself believe that this harmless connection was proof I still deserved better. I also began spending more on myself, little luxuries like spa visits or new clothes, things I told myself were necessary rewards for working so hard. And when Leo's card was available, I decided to use it without permission, convinced he would not even notice, or if he did, he would silently cover it. My family only reinforced this confidence because my mother Clara always said I deserved indulgence after handling kids and work. And even my sister Sophie laughed when I boasted that Leo never argued back no matter what I did. Meanwhile, his mother Helen gave me those suspicious looks that made me roll my eyes. And I decided she was just jealous that her son had married a woman who could control a room. I told myself repeatedly that my choices were justified because Leo had grown dull. He had forgotten how to make me feel special, and if I needed to step outside boundaries to feel alive, then it was simply his fault for letting the spark fade. That was the foundation of everything. My belief that I could spend what I wanted, take the attention I wanted, and manipulate the story however necessary. And at that point, I truly believed nothing could shake the comfortable life I had built. The first real crack appeared on an ordinary Saturday morning, when I swiped Leo's card for a boutique purchase, and the cashier quietly told me it had been declined, which made my cheeks burn, even though I laughed it off, pretending there must be a bank error, because I could not accept that Leo might have acted deliberately. At home, I checked my phone and saw his silence stretched longer than usual. No casual updates about errands, only this heavy distance that felt calculated, yet I brushed it aside and told myself he was sulking like always. Later that afternoon, Clara reassured me that husbands often hide money games to make wives feel guilty, and I eagerly agreed because I liked the story where I was always the victim. I told Sophie that Leo must be depressed or maybe controlling, and when she hesitated before answering, I felt the first sting of doubt that my narrative might not convince everyone anymore. By the following week, the tension had grown impossible to ignore, because Leo moved around the house with this quiet determination, not shouting, not accusing, simply keeping every sentence short while his eyes stayed unreadable, and it unnerved me, more than any argument could have. I tried to regain balance by gossiping with friends over dinner, mocking his seriousness and suggesting he was too uptight, and they laughed politely, though I noticed a few glances that felt sharper than usual. Helen called later and insisted Leo was only protecting himself after years of my carelessness, which infuriated me, so I accused her of poisoning him against me, repeating to Clara that his entire family wanted to see me fail. At night, I convinced myself his silence meant he had no plan, but deep inside, I felt the walls shifting and I hated how powerless that made me. Everything collapsed the night Leo posted the credit card statement online with every luxury item circled in red, tagging family and friends so no one could pretend they had not seen the truth. And my phone lit up with messages before I could even process what he had done. I called it cruel and humiliating, telling Clara he had crossed a line by airing private matters, and she agreed instantly, saying a real man would never embarrass his wife that way. Sophie, however, stayed quiet when I ranted, and later she admitted Leo had probably reached his limit, which felt like betrayal because I expected unconditional support. At home, I demanded Leo explain himself, but he remained calm, collected, and simply told me nothing beyond the fact that the accounts were frozen, leaving me furious because his silence carried more power than my loudest accusations ever had. Days later, I came home to find a neat folder on the kitchen table, full of legal documents with Leo's name carefully signed, and my chest tightened when I realized this was not another bluff, but an official step towards separating finances and arranging temporary custody for Ella and Noah. I tried to frame it as abuse when I spoke with Clara, insisting Leo was punishing me unfairly, but even she faltered when Sophie pointed out the evidence was undeniable. I accused Leo of being heartless, telling anyone who would listen that he wanted to destroy me, yet he never raised his voice, only showed receipts and timelines that made my protest sound hollow. For the first time, I understood he was fighting differently, not through anger but through law, and that frightened me more than any dramatic confrontation could have. In court, Leo presented everything with cold precision, laying out bank statements, screenshots of messages with Damien, and testimony about my spending habits, while I sat there insisting I had only wanted affection and fairness. The judge listened without much expression, but when temporary custody shifted toward Leo and financial protections were granted to him, I felt the ground beneath me tilt. Helen placed a steady hand on his shoulder, as if victory belonged to her as well, while Clara glared at everyone like the entire world was conspiring against me. I tried to cry and make it seem like Leo was cruel, but the silence in the room told me nobody believed that version anymore. Leaving the courthouse, I realized my voice had lost its power, and his quiet evidence now defined every part of my story. The days after court stretched into a blur of silence, because Leo no longer engaged with me at all. He simply collected the children on schedule, handled his responsibilities, and left me standing in doorways with words that had nowhere to land. I kept insisting to Clara that he was punishing me unfairly, that freezing accounts and taking custody was cruel, but even she began to soften her tone, suggesting maybe I should focus on regaining stability rather than blaming him. Sophie avoided confrontation, yet her distance spoke volumes, and Helen carried herself with quiet triumph as if she had always known her son would prevail without rage. Damien was gone completely, leaving no trace of the validation I once thought priceless, and I hated the realization that he had only been a temporary distraction who abandoned me when real costs appeared. Everywhere I turned, I saw reminders of how my narrative had unraveled. From the empty closet, where Marcus's things had been neatly removed, to the social media posts, still echoing with my financial indulgences, displayed like evidence of arrogance. In the end, Leo never shouted, never begged, never fought in the ways I expected. He simply documented, filed, and executed until nothing remained for me to twist, and the quietness of his lawful revenge cut sharper than any argument could have. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city are you watching.